The views expressed on this podcast are Peter Dekom's opinions based on his legal experience, research, and academic work. The podcast does not offer legal advice. For any legal matters, always consult an independent attorney who can assess your specific situation. And now, on with the show.
Hi, it's Peter Dekom again, and my catchy little title for today is Healthcare Hell. We really have a big question in this country about whether or not being sick or injured is a political reality or a medical reality. Right now, it's vastly more political than it is medical. And we are the only developed country on planet Earth, maybe there are a few other planets that may be involved, Venus is possibly one of them, where they don't have, that have universal health care. Everybody. And it's interesting because most people look at universal health care from the cost to the system and how efficiently it works to take care of people. But they don't look at the economic sidebars. And the economic sidebar here is that if you're in a country that has universal health care, generally speaking, collective bargaining agreements in those countries, like Canada and England, et cetera, don't even have to deal with health care. And generally speaking, that the cost of health care is not something that has to be separately factored into the cost of the products they manufacture. So as a result, countries with universal health care always have less expensive health care than we do. As a matter of fact, in all developed countries, all major industrial countries, all Western countries, we have the most expensive and least efficient health care system in the entire world, unless you're rich. And we notice that there is a definite trend in our country to provide benefits and wonderment to those who are billionaires or centimillionaires or at least very stinking rotten rich. But to pay for all those luxuries we're granting the upper echelon of our economy, and we're talking top 2, 3, 4%, somebody has to pay for it. Well, if you are in power and you're a tech bro or you're a billionaire or whatever, and you hate taxes, you know if you cut taxes for you, the benefits have to be cut for somebody else. And since you don't give a rat's ass about the benefits, we know who's going to pay for it in release of benefits. That's where we sit today. But when you have a system where profits are vastly, that's the priority, not healthcare. It's important for doctors, not so much doctors, basically big institutions, pharmacological companies, pharmas as we call them, or perhaps insurance companies, middlemen, and God knows the pharmaceutical arena has lots of those. But the problem is most Americans are on my side, and most Americans are having to struggle with the horrific cost that this healthcare mess puts on all of us. And if you prioritize profits, things like capping costs or absorbing costs in other ways are completely controversial because anything that interferes with profit making is considered creeping socialism. Now, I've gone through this dozens of times before. Creeping socialism has less to do with socialism than it does with creeps. But socialism has nothing to do with universal health care. It's just like, for example, if I have my kid going to a public school, is that socialism? Or is social media socialism because it has the word social in it? Oh, that's not true. So social programs like public education and healthcare that is provided through government facilities, and not only by the government, maybe by private, healthcare providers, but it's a government program. It's a program. It's not a way of constructing an entire country. Socialism is a way of constructing an entire company, means the government owns everything that produces products, all the land, and it controls who lives where, who makes what, where you go to school, what you do in a school, what you're allowed to do after you graduate. This is not what we have here. What we have here is a huge drain on American productivity. If someone does not have health care and they go to work and they're sick, what do? They spread their illness. And what happens when a lot of people spread that illness? We have a health care problem, which can become an epidemic or escalate into a pandemic. As we have watched the Centers for Disease Control issue the most inane, unscientific, unmedically founded quack issues what we're seeing is a rise in diseases that we thought were gone. Measles was supposed to be gone a long time ago. Measles outbreaks are going on like crazy. It's like fire. Places in Florida are experiencing nasty measles outbreaks. But getting vaccines could cause terrible diseases if you listen to the CDC and the non-experts there. Not having young children inoculated with anti-hepatitis vaccines. Well, that's not a huge deal until they get older. And there is a medical correlation between not being vaccinated as a young child and getting fun things like liver cancer later in life or cirrhosis of the liver. There are lots of things that happen because some crazy-ass radical conspiracy theorist decides, I don't need a medical degree. I just need a mouth. It may be an infected mouth, but I don't care. So you're also seeing things going on that are secondary costs. Let's say you take away all these medical benefits from people. Just take them away. And clearly, the way things are going in Congress, whatever's being posited out there is going to deprive a large number of people of their medical benefits. And I'm going to go down in what the programs do and what they don't do, et cetera. The whole thing is about Obamacare. I don't know why they still use that name. It's the Affordable Care Act, or the ACA. And that's a much better description because it's been so changed since Obama led the charge in 2010 by Supreme Court decisions, by modifications in Congress, et cetera, which, by the way, is how all these social programs happen. Any major piece of seminal legislation is always amended after a year or two of practice. It's not like, oh, no, it didn't work, we have to throw it out. It very much like, building a building. If you see a room that's wrong, you can fix the room. You don't have to tear down the entire structure and start over again. So we have an interesting situation that has basically become the utter and total politicalization of healthcare. And there's nothing worse for you than that. Even getting the damn disease, at least if healthcare is not politicized, you can go to the doctor and maybe they can treat you. But if healthcare is appropriately politicized, you're screwed. You just don't get the healthcare. Or you come in too late. Well, let's say you still go to an emergency room because, I feel, you got to do that. So you sit in a room with a whole bunch of infected people. You may pick up some new wonderful diseases, share with your friends, but you're going to get treated if you look ugly enough. And if you're bleeding or showing swelling or other signs, triage will get you into treatment. You will be treated in an emergency room. But who pays for that? Everybody else. Everybody who accesses that hospital. That hospital has to find a way to absorb those costs somehow. So all services in that hospital increase in price. And all increases in prices affect whether you're insured or whether you're just rich and you don't give a damn. You're going to pay more one way or the other. And we're facing that right now as Congress grapples with what to do with Obamacare subsidies, which we're looking at approximately 24 million people who use the ACA, and they have the bronze, the silver, the gold, the platinum, different plans within it, and you get different coverage at different levels. And the problem with ACA now is if you're on the bottom levels, the deductibles can be thousands of dollars. We'll talk about why that has become a political football with the Republican bill that's pending through Congress, although I doubt it's going to get passed. But even Trump has come to the conclusion, looking at the numbers as the Republican Party falls in the polls in every special election, every Gallup poll, Fox poll, North poll, pole dancing, whatever it is, the Republican Party, not just Trump, are plummeting and dropping like a stone. So as Trump wakes up one morning, and when he's not having a hand makeup job or he's not asleep in the middle of a meeting, he realizes that this has become a really big issue for people. And when people talk about affordability, in his mind, he's picturing gasoline, he's picturing maybe rent, he's picturing what it costs to buy a melon, some eggs, a dead chicken, whatever it is. He's not looking at the services. The cost of medical care is absolutely a mega component. I'm going to go through an example of this. We spend right now we have not spent less than 17% of gross domestic product in years We're now well north of 17%, and according to some experts, we're heading to 18.5%. And, we're talking trillions and trillions of dollars here, and we are paying the most for the least. I can't imagine why we were that as stupid as we are to pay so much for so little. The average percentage of GDP that is spent on healthcare among countries that are, developed countries is a little over 10%. In fact, it's 10.35% if you want to get specific. So I was going to compare our healthcare system, which is somewhere around 18+%, with the average. And I said, let's be really tough on ourselves. Let's compare ourselves to the next best, next most expensive universal healthcare plan on the planet. It's in Germany. And there are different approaches. This is an oversimplification of the German healthcare plan. It is managed through private insurers who are paid a fixed percentage of the revenues to administer the plan. Everybody in those insurance companies is an expert in the field. They might as well be doctors. They really know what they're talking about. And everybody in the system, depending on where you are, will get a designated healthcare senior professional to look after you. But in Germany, again, the most expensive healthcare system on earth, when you take the United States out of the mix, they spend 12.5% of GDP on healthcare. So Peter decides to try and go back to arithmetic. Let's look at how many people have it. Of the 38 high-income nations, which is basically the OECD makes that determination, that 6 countries out of the 38 nations, Chile, Colombia, Costa Rica, Mexico, Poland, and the United States, do not have universal or near universal healthcare cover for their medical services. That means the rest do. We're the outlier. We have no damn excuse. We're the richest country on the planet. We have the highest technology development and pharmacological development in the world. Germany is right up there too. So is France. So is Norway. But we like money. So we want to make sure that the rich people who are involved in healthcare stay rich. And oddly enough, that's not doctors. Doctors are working their posteriors off. I have my stepson is in residence here. He just graduated from medical school. My daughter-in-law is head of a neonatal unit in a local Los Angeles hospital. And, they're not actually looking at becoming rich. They're looking more at becoming able to repay their ridiculous sums that they have to pay in student loans. Not only that, but the government just passed a determination that nurses are not considered professionals who would qualify for scholarships or basically loans within the governmental programs. Nurses aren't professionals. When was the last time you were in a hospital and you needed care? You want this amateur nurse walk around and do amateur injections and amateur? No. Some of these nurses are more sophisticated than the physicians who supervise them. And at the end of all of this, saying to the world nurses are not professionals is absurd. It's disgusting. I don't understand it. I don't support it, and I will do anything in my power to change that. It's funny. My daughter-in-law, who is been practicing for about a decade as a neonatal pediatrician, said if she had to do it over again, she would consider just being a nurse. She is very proud of her nurses. She loves them. They work for her in her unit. And she really, really enjoys letting them shine. She supervises them because ultimately the buck stops with her, and she knows that. But ultimately, we need those nurses. We need professionals. And the problem with all this stuff is everything's intertwined. I mean, you think climate change is just climate change? Try living in a really unhealthy environment for a while and see how often you need medical care. I mean, it doesn't help if you gag and cough and you live in a smog-infested area. It doesn't help you if the water is polluted. It doesn't help you if you basically have pollutants dumped onto your land. So healthcare is kind of a combination of, I'd say, responsibilities. When somebody does something toxic to you or the environment in which you live in, you would think they would be responsible for the associated costs. That's not the way it works. The government, basically, especially the Republican Party, has long since said, we can do that. The Environmental Protection Agency is superfluous. We're cutting back its ability to make rules. We don't really care about water quality. We say we do. We don't really care if our people are allowed to dump pollutants into our rivers and streams. We don't really care if lakes become polluted again. We cleaned them up once, but we're now going through an era where, well, we're doing it again. So you look at all these things going on. Let's also look at the cost of doctors. If you graduate with $150,000 to $350,000 in tuition loans to get an MD degree, number one, you got to pay it back. Number two, if you're going to pay that back on any basis, if you had this altruistic desire at some point in your life to be good to people, to take care of those who couldn't afford health care, who's going to pay you so you can pay back those loans? So you're seeing an increasing number of people graduating with professional degrees, medical degrees, scientific degrees, etc., taking highly compensated jobs, not because that's what they wanted to do, but it's basically because, they need to make enough money to pay back the damn loans. That's absurd. We have people ready to we are absolutely short general practitioners. We don't have people who do that. In rural areas where the GP is probably the only physician anyone's ever going to see, they are disappearing by the millions, not millions, by the tens of thousands. Hospitals in rural areas are closing because they can't support this stuff. And all of that comes down to a question. If these doctors are leaving to do specialized medicine where they can get paid more, why are we encouraging that activity? Why do we think that's a good idea? And right now, we have probably 25% of the general practitioners we need. So we're really making stuff cost more for us. And you're going to actually see people, the insurance companies are the last ones to give up money. So let's keep going on with my comparison here, because I picked Germany for a reason. I picked it as the next highest cost as a percentage of gross domestic product as any country in the world. We're number one, they're number two. So you would think if we're not using averages, and there's a big difference between 10% and 12.5% in terms of the percentage of an entire economic system. So I figured out, okay, the difference in GDP is 4.85%. So they are 4.85% cheaper as a percentage of GDP than the United States. And if you basically take that 4.85%, which is, it actually would be, if you use the average, it would look more like 6 or 7%. But I went with the high side because I wanted to make sure we compared apples with golden apples. And here's the number. 4.85% of $3.8 trillion, which is our GDP, comes out to about $184 billion. If you use the other numbers, use lower average and stuff, you could get up to $200 or $300 billion. What is that? Those are profits. That is waste. That is stuff we don't need and we're spending money on that doesn't go to healthcare. So we have at least $184 billion a year of what I will call medical waste. I think it's more like $300 or $400 billion, but whatever it is, it's a lot of money. And we don't cover everybody. And we have things like medical bankruptcy. We don't have medical bankruptcy. Or you have somebody who needs a treatment. It's just too expensive. So how do we exclude it? We say experimental. It's not tested. Okay, you're going to die. Death is a statistic to an insurance company. Death is a whole lot more meaningful to an individual family that's about to lose a child. And I think that kind of situation where we basically say, we're actually telling you how much a life is worth, not really something I'm comfortable doing, but it's also something I'm not comfortable doing when there's enough money in the system to cover that need. Now, maybe that particular hospital or that particular insurance company isn't equipped financially or otherwise, to pay extraordinary expenses, which is another argument why it shouldn't be a private matter. It should be a collective pool we call the United States. And we don't seem to have problems with collective pools in other areas. We just seem to have a collective pool when it comes to dealing with people who are sick and in need, or born with defects or injuries or all kinds of other fun things that we expect the medical profession to be able to deal with. I just really have to say that I'm shocked that we have to deal with cheaper, fewer, less, and pay, oh my God, so much more for it. And if you don't think that's a tax, well, it's not the way it works. You are taxed effectively if you wish to remain healthy. If you don't care about health and death is just an alternative state of being, that's an interesting ontological discussion. But all I can tell you, if you go to China and you get sick, you're Chinese, you're going to get cared for. And by the way, Chinese are beginning to beat the crap out of us in every single thing they do. We'll talk more about that on other moments. But we also have some stuff going on in the world where we don't even communicate because we don't want to look at what's really happening. Right now, there's something called it's an H3N2 flu strain, and in China is beginning to grow like wildfire. And you know that any country that has a massive breakout of any kind of highly transmissible disease is going to wind up infecting large segments of the earth. Maybe it fizzles out, maybe it doesn't, but that's on the horizon. But we don't get vaccines because vaccines cause autism. We know that. It's an absolute fact. Ask RFK, who got that information, RFK Jr., got that information from the bear before he killed him and put him in Central Park. I don't understand how a man like RFK can make a decision about anything. But then again, if you can put a reservist major alcohol recovering dude and start in charge of our entire military, I guess you could do that with a medical thing too. I'm just looking at the fact that you have a man who got this job running HHS, Health and Human Services, and immediately got rid of all the professionals, got rid of the doctors who had years and decades of experiments, cut back all the funding for as many universities as possible because they were doing medical research that would result in vaccinations. And basically, we started watching. I'm not kidding. Diseases are growing. We may well see the renaissance of polio. So you're looking at all these lovely combinations. We're not competitive globally because healthcare, we have to pay if there's a union involved. If you're manufacturing cars in Detroit and you're providing medical benefits for those working on the line, that doesn't include robots. I think oil is cheaper. But if you're working in Detroit, et cetera, the average cost of medical benefits to a vehicle is north of $2,000, $2,500 a vehicle. You're paying for that. If it's part of the overall taxing schema, if it's part of a universal health care schema, which takes a percentage of your income, it's not free. The government funds it, but taxpayers fund it. Then, it's a cheaper rate. That doesn't go into the car you're buying. And maybe you're getting a bargain on that car because that car would have cost a couple of $1,000 more. Instead, we're charging tariffs that basically are driving the cost of everything up. And if you don't believe me, watch the prices this Christmas. This is the first time this country is going to feel the impact of those tariffs in a massive way because we've been having them trickle in. There's old inventory that was purchased without the tariffs. That's all vaporizing. You're now going to pay, open your noses because here it comes through your nose. I really look at the fact that we can't afford not to have universal health care, and I'll deal with that at the end of this stuff. But what happens is you have insurance companies who need to make a certain amount of money. So they will cap what they actually are willing to pay for certain diseases. So if you go into a hospital and you have disease X or broken bone Y or injury Z, they put caps on what the insurance companies can charge. You may, if you've had some kinds of go in, for example, with Medicare and go into a doctor and the doctor looks at you and bats her furry eyes and says, I don't take Medicare. Well, there's a lot of that going on, and there are a lot of doctors who simply will not pay for or cover things within the caps of insurance companies. They are not doctors who are in approved lists, et cetera. And that's wrong. I mean, I can't tell you that how bad people feel. One of the things we do is we go out this big fraudulent thing called the supplemental health care to cover all the little things that Medicare doesn't cover. And if you look at it, what you're doing is you're signing on, I have to use this doctor and I'm capped at this, and this when I go for my benefits. You're signing on for limitations. And even though you may think you're getting a couple of wonderful benefits like, oh, I got hearing. What'd you say? I said, you got hearing coverage. Huh? Vision coverage. Oh, where are you? The reality is you're actually limiting where the coverage goes. And that's the way it goes. So if China is sitting there doing really well, and yes, they have economic issues in China. I'm never going to tell you they didn't. They made some big, stupid mistakes. But now you have a very conservative group of people whom, since the day the ACA was passed, and that happened at a time when both houses of Congress were Democratic, Obama got this thing through, and then I will say the Republicans have spent nothing but year after year after year eroding or trying to kill ACA completely. Get rid of it. We hate it. We don't want it. They also say we want to go to the private system where people go back in the system the way it was and get health insurance. But if you look and read among and between the lines, you will see a little thing there. And that is, if I go into the system, I get to bargain with that healthcare system. And if I'm young and healthy, I get to pay a much lower rate. But if I'm old, like 40% of Americans have some kind of disability or impairment that requires special medical treatment, you're going to pay more. Remember when we had this thing where the ACA was passed where they couldn't reject you for existing conditions, or they couldn't charge you more? Bye-bye. Bye-bye. That's going to go away. I just got an invoice for my wife's insurance, and we pay a lot. I'm not going to give you the specifics, but we got hundreds and hundreds of dollars of boost, and you have to pay for everything. You go in, there's a copay, there's a cap, there's a minimum payment when you go to see a doctor, there's a minimum payment for pharmacological needs, etc. So a lot of companies are providing different kinds of benefits for their employees where they have it. They'll get a healthcare policy that's a high deductible, and they'll pay the deductible directly themselves. Now, if you have a political party that does not believe that healthcare is a necessity or a right, and that everybody who gets healthcare should have to pay for it, and if you have more healthcare demands than somebody else, you should pay more, that's the philosophy that's guiding what's going on in this debate, because all those subsidies for people who work or don't work or can't work, but mostly this covers, the Obamacare, it covers working people. And for those who don't make enough money to pay insurance, they get subsidies from the government. And those subsidies allow them to have insurance. We added 14 million people to our insurance rolls after the ACA was passed. And now if we go with the Republican plan, we are going to wind up losing millions of people who can't afford any health care. And because the only place they can find health care is in an emergency room, number one, they're not likely to go to an emergency room early enough to stop something that could be very serious and could be very nasty. But when they go, as I said, someone has to pay for it. And that is going to cost everything. We're also looking right now, we have a master list of about 368 rural hospitals, depending on Medicaid. And that Medicaid cut around 900, it's about, a trillion, almost $1 trillion over the next decade is coming out of Medicaid. And those hospitals have no way of providing medical support for people who live in rural communities unless they access Medicaid. But we got to pay money to get those damn rich people more stuff. Hey, my jet is a little old. I need to update. My yacht, it's a little small for the 50 people I have on my party boat. Oh, I only have 4 homes. I need a couple in Europe and 1 in Latin America. I'm sorry. I don't really see why we have to give up benefits, encourage breakouts of disease, forget about health care for people because somebody wants a bigger boat. I don't get it. And it's funny because when you look at the tariffs, as I've told you before, it's a regressive tax because it's charged on goods, and very few mega billionaires spend that much of their income on goods. They spend it on other stuff, but not goods. The people who spend it on necessities like food and gasoline and steel and all the other stuff are ordinary people. So the people who pay that tariff tax are middle-class people and lower-class people, and people who pay very little of it are at the top of the food chain. That doesn't seem too fair. You know why? Because it's not! As I've said before, this lovely tariff combination with cuts in services and benefits, particularly medical, plus a tax cut, is the largest transfer of wealth from middle and lower classes to the wealthiest in the country in our entire history. So if you're happy with that, if you're happy with the corporate state, if you're happy with tech bros being treated as gods and you treated like the stuff that you flush down the toilet, well, you know what? And we also don't want rich dudes to have to spend to clean up the air, clean up the water. So if you happen to be breathing their crap, or you're stepping in it, or you're swimming in it, or you're drinking it, they can afford any kind of water they want. They can have filtration systems. They can import the water from Fiji or wherever the hell they want it. And you can't. That doesn't seem particularly good. But it's also fascinating that before the United States Supreme Court, that they're having a very interesting moment in the time-space continuum. They're saying the president has the right to fire anybody. We haven't got the final decision, but if you listen to the oral arguments, you know which way the 6-3 majority is leaning. We'll get the answer probably in June. But they're kind of saying the president has the right to fire anybody in the executive branch unless it was so purposely designed to make sure that it was fair and there is a committee in charge of it like the Federal Reserve. He can fire anybody he wants. So he gets rid of people who are implementing good, sound medicine and replace them with quack, 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 with RFK Jr. people who think he has expertise. I have yet to see it. I'm a skeptic. I'm skeptical of Democrats and Republicans who open their mouths and say stuff or make up numbers. I'm going to go check it out. And a lot of people go out there and check it out. And right now, what I'm seeing is a lot of lying. People fabricating, completely and totally fabricating what they're doing, making up numbers, making up statistics, etc. And what's also fascinating is in the last, well, particularly since January 20th, I wonder what happened on January 20th. Let me think. There is a complete reluctance to provide verifiable statistics about anything that could be even slightly negative. And that includes, by way of example, labor statistics. Trump didn't like the labor statistics. He fired the head of the Department of BLS, labor statistics. The numbers have come out with a lot fewer people and a lot slower. And I can tell you that they're still bad. No matter what you do, if you have the truth, well, think about that from a medical perspective. Think of the Centers for Disease Control basically fabricating statements, replacing hard-ass, experimented, very well vetted imperial reality with conspiracy theories that have absolutely no credible medical support. This autism and Tylenol should tell you something. I mean, at my age, I don't think I'm going to take a damn Tylenol and be autistic, although, you never know because they could be right, not at all. So at some point, what you're doing when you get subpar medical care, for whatever reason, you have caps on your insurance, you have big deductibles, you have massive copays, or you have basically the ability to exclude people entirely because of pre-existing conditions, what you are doing is subsidizing billionaires and centimillionaires. So if you like giving rich people more money while you suffer, you got the right program. This is where you should be. If you're totally masochistic and decide that pain is your thing and that suffering is basically what you're all about, So let's look at these accounts the Republicans are talking about, because they're saying, look, the lower levels of the ACA, like the bronze and the silver plan, have big deductibles. Effectively, what these plans are is emergency health care in case something major and disastrous happens to you. But if you live in the ordinary course of ordinary, you may have a $6,000 deductible. Huh? What? That means I don't get nothing unless I got that much problems in my way with my family? Uh-huh. That's exactly what it means. And so what Mr. Cassidy, a certain senator who I will not name, I just named him, has come up with a plan, and it's also in the president's plan, and that is we're going to cut the subsidies entirely, and we're going to give every American below a certain income level a check for $1,500, $2,000, and you get to go into the private marketplace. I hope you have the expertise to evaluate competing policies. You get to go into the marketplace, and we're even going to let you cross state lines to look at insurance companies in nearby states, but you have to buy it. And that way, you will immediately get coverage when you buy that policy, and you won't have to deal with that big deductible. There's a little catch for that. You got to pay for the insurance on top of that. So it's not just the deductible that's the battle, it's the cost of the insurance. And none of these plans coming from the lovely, caring GOP have what we have. You can't charge more for pre-existing conditions, because they're saying the free market has to set the prices. And obviously, if you're a healthy young person, you have fewer medical demands than someone like an old coot like me, or someone even in their ancient 40s or 50s. You just don't have to worry about that because you're young. So we'll give you a skinny policy, which will exclude all the things you're unlikely to get. It'll be very affordable, and it won't mean much. The other problem, we're living in a world. Let's take a look at what the House is coming up with the care here. There are bills going back and forth in the Senate and now in the House. There's the simple, let's extend subsidies for another couple of years from the Democrats with no other major embellishments. And the Republicans saying, we never want to see the ACA subsidies ever, ever, ever again. We don't want those. We're not subsidizing sick people. Screw you! Well, maybe you can. Maybe you need to see a urologist. Okay. So as you deal with all these lovely, lovely caring things, you are looking at a plan that cannot work. And over the decades, you have seen Republicans saying, hey, let's have private investment accounts replace Social Security. I think George W. Bush made a strong recommendation for that, and it got shot down by his own party because they began to get so many complaints from their constituents. Are you out of your mind? You're going to let me invest my money? What if I made a mistake? What if the market turns? Not because I made I'm dumb. And what happens to the security, that Social Security? I lose it all. What do I get instead? How about nothing? So those plans have always died. And I will tell you right now, the plan, as long as it doesn't cover these subsidies in some way, isn't going to work either. Let me read something from the KFF. That's the Kaiser Family Foundation. Describing the healthcare initiative from the Republicans. This is the kind of greatest hits of Republican healthcare ideas of the last decade. They're mired in the fact that they never, ever want to cover people who are really sick. So if you are looking at that as an alternative, it doesn't work. You aren't going to get covered. You're going to have medical bankruptcies still looming out there. And today, by the way, medical bankruptcies are still the greatest source of bankruptcy in the system. So we need to have those subsidies picked up, because if they aren't picked up, you're going to look at increases in healthcare for those people, averaging 117% increase. Huh? What? More than doubling what they're paying now. So if you're paying $600 a month for your insurance under one of these subsidized plans, you're now going to go up to like $1,300, $1,400 a month. And since most Americans, I'd say 40% of Americans, don't even have enough to pay a $1,000 emergency out of their existing savings, you clearly have destroyed the economy for a lot of other people. Forget about affordable housing, forget about the cost of everything else. So we really need a different system. And all I can say is this tax cut, this big, beautiful bill, and all of its machinations, this tax cut and the associated cuts to Medicaid, Medicare, et cetera, and this relooking at what they call the fraud of Social Security is the dumbest, most inane, selfish, greedy son of a bitch bill in the history of the United States. It needs to be burned. It got passed only because Republicans voted for it. I don't think Democrats had much to do with its passage. And as long as that big, beautiful bill is, look at our deficit. We're $38 trillion in debt, and we're paying higher interest because interest rates rise because the world doesn't trust the United States anymore. So they charge us more interest. It's just nasty. And it doesn't get fixed overnight. The damage that has been done to our economy and our healthcare system will linger for years and years, if not more than a decade, if we even decide to fix it. And the first time we're going to have that test is going to be at the midterms. So what's going on in the midterms? Well, that's a whole different story. And when you get to it on a future podcast, we're trying to rig the election, said the Republican Party, to be fair. Well, what does that mean? Well, that means Democrats have to be squeezed out because we don't want them. It's only fair if we do that. So gerrymandering and voter restrictions and all kinds of other stuff are much, much, much more important than they have ever been. So we have a government now that lies to us with statistics, foments plans that are absolutely against almost 100% of qualified physicians. And then we have scientific research like climate change. 99% of all qualified scientists agree that climate change is man-made and needs to be contained if we're going to have a healthy world for ourselves. But all these things, they're hoax. Oh, it's a democratic, it's a scam. No, it's not. And it's not like the ACA is the problem. It's not perfect. I can tell you there is nothing out there that is perfect. But if you, instead of trying to tear it down and build up something that we know is a disaster, maybe we can fix what we've got. Or, as I'm about to tell you, there's only one solution. I think I'll wait a little bit on that. But we don't trust the CDC. We don't trust the Department of Health and Human Services at all. Not professionals, not people who are trained to look at medical issues. We don't trust them. So we now have seen a new department. California is one of several states. The entire West Coast is unifying to replace the CDC because our governments and state governments do not trust the numbers coming out of the CDC. They do not trust the medical recommendations from the CDC. So they're basically, hiring a bunch of the people that RFK Jr. fired to run the new California department, version of the CDC. And a bunch of states are getting together to share their resources. So when there are medical recommendations, the CDC has as much medical power and weight as me, which is nothing. But states acting in unison, affirming professionals, medicals, people of years, decades of experience evaluating medical technologies, pharmaceuticals, etc., now create a parallel system which, in spite of the Health and Human Services Department, in spite of the Centers for Disease Control, comes up with the numbers we can believe. Why are we wasting money like this? Because, we politicized medical health care. So it's more important what your theory is, what your ideology is, than facts. Next time you want to have some medical care, call up your local conspiracy theorist and say, hey, would you treat this for me? How much will you charge me? We don't need medical degrees. We'll just have a conspiracy theorist in a conveniently located kiosk near your home. It's sort of like, look at peanuts. There's something, psychiatric, 5 cents. It's gone up maybe 25 cents now. But ultimately, you want them to work on you? Do you want to put your life at risk? How about if you don't have an automobile accident? Someone comes up to you and says, I have a theory about accidents. If you let just your body heal on its own, you'll be much better off than having set your bones and stitch up the open wounds or give you an antibiotic, because antibiotics cause, let's list a whole bunch of, fatal diseases. You can't live like that. So my approach here is very simple. You can't start saying creeping social. The minute someone says creeping socialism to you, shut your ears off in your brain, because they're trying to convince you of something that doesn't exist. It's just wrong. Creeping socialism is not what we're doing. We're not giving the government control. Oh, wait a minute. Trump is taking percentages of businesses. So Trump is sort of doing more socialist activity than, well, you make up your own damn mind. But I'll tell you right now, socialism has nothing to do with social programs. It is just the fact that they have the same word. As I said earlier, if you think something that has social in it, like, I have a social disease. No, that's not it. Social media. That's not socialism. It's social media. Hey, let's go out and socialize. What does that mean? Let's go out and create a socialist government? No, stop missing the word. Pick up the dictionary if you don't believe me. And you don't have to believe anything I say. You can start off, do your own damn research. It's okay. I'm not scared of that. That the people who use the words like creeping socialism want to make sure you don't get anywhere near a dictionary, because it will not provide the information and perception that they want you to believe. Do it yourself. Don't believe me. Pick up the damn dictionary, a real dictionary, not the MAGA dictionary. Pick it up. Look up socialism. Read about it. You want to get more in depth? Pick up what we call an encyclopedia. If they still exist, they do online. I know Britannica has a wonderful online encyclopedia. Do it for yourself. In the end, the only answer for our country is universal health care. There is no other solution that is going to work. And all our efforts to work around it and keep profits and stuff in the system, you have a choice, America. Pick one. They're mutually exclusive. Put profits as your guiding light or health care as your guiding light. They don't get along at all. Not that you can't provide reasonable fees for things people do, but when your entire focus is how profitable your company can be, that is never going to give you health care you want. And I'm Peter Dekom, and that's a lot more of my opinion than you probably wanted to hear, but I hope I made some sense to you. Thanks. We'll see you next time. Thanks.
If you would like to give feedback, suggestions for new topics, or have a question that might be selected for a future podcast, please email us at dekompodcast@gmail.com. Thank you for listening. Until next time.